What if I told you that hidden within the ancient traditions of Egypt, Judaism, and mystic esoteric texts lies a powerful symbol? One that's believed to be a divine vehicle of light, a bridge between dimensions, a chariot of ascension. A shape so sacred and complex, it defies mere geometry. Yet it's encoded in the very structure of the universe, of our bodies, and perhaps even our consciousness. This is the story of the Merkaba, an ancient mystery that spans millennia, revered by mystics, rediscovered by modern seekers, and now the subject of renewed curiosity in the age of spiritual awakening and quantum science. Today, we journey into the heart of this enigma. We'll trace its roots from the sands of ancient Egypt to the mystical visions of the Hebrew prophets, through Kabbalistic teachings and into the minds of modern metaphysicists. But more than just its historical trail, we'll explore what the Merkaba actually is, what it means, and why so many believe it holds the key to unlocking higher consciousness, healing, and even interdimensional travel. The story of the Merkaba is not just about geometry or symbols. It is a window into how ancient civilizations understood reality, a multidimensional code that touches on science, spirit, and the sacred. And perhaps, if we listen closely, it may whisper truths that we've long forgotten. Let's begin. The word Merkaba, sometimes spelled Merkaba or Merkava, originates from Hebrew. It appears in several books of the Hebrew Bible, but its most iconic mention is in the book of Ezekiel. There, the prophet describes a surreal vision: a whirlwind from the north, a great cloud with fire enfolding itself, and 4 living creatures with wheels within wheels, full of eyes. Strange? Absolutely. But to mystics, this was no dream. It was a vision of a divine chariot, the Merkaba, carrying the prophet through heavenly realms. In Hebrew, the word Merkaba is derived from the root RKB, which means to ride or chariot. Literally, it translates to chariot, but spiritually, it came to represent far more: a divine vehicle of light that transports the soul to higher planes of existence. In Jewish mysticism, particularly in Merkaba mysticism of the early centuries CE, this concept was the centerpiece of esoteric practices aimed at achieving ecstatic communion with God. But the Merkaba is far older than its biblical context. To truly understand its roots, we must go further back, to the Nile Valley. Ancient Egypt was a civilization obsessed with the soul's journey after death. Their pyramids were not merely tombs, they were ascension chambers, filled with hieroglyphs and sacred geometries. According to some esoteric traditions, the origins of the Merkaba can be traced to Egypt, where it was understood not as a single symbol, but as a synthesis of spiritual light, life force energy, and divine motion. Break the word down phonetically, as many metaphysical scholars have done, and you get Mer, light, Ka, spirit, and Ba, body. Together, the spirit body surrounded by light, the Merkaba. This linguistic interpretation is not supported by mainstream Egyptology, which considers it a modern metaphysical reinterpretation. However, the symbolic resonance is powerful. It aligns with ancient teachings that suggest the soul is not confined to the body but is surrounded by a dynamic energy field. And that field, if activated and balanced, can serve as a vehicle between dimensions. At this point, you might be wondering, how is this connected to actual history? Where is the tangible trail? Enter Jewish mysticism in the early centuries of the Common Era. In texts like the Hekkalot literature and the Book of Enoch, we see the evolution of Merkaba mysticism, an ecstatic, dangerous, and highly secretive tradition. Practitioners would engage in intense meditation, breathing exercises, chanting of divine names, and mental visualization to ascend the heavenly palaces, the Hekkalot. The Merkaba was the chariot that carried them there. This was not mainstream Judaism. These were mystical outliers, often isolated, often controversial. But their visions were powerful. They described angelic beings, cosmic wheels, fiery thrones, and layers of heaven. Their journeys were guarded by archangels and filled with divine codes. Not everyone survived the experience. Some lost their minds. Others returned enlightened. In these mystical accounts, the Merkaba was more than a concept, it was an experience. a transformative encounter with the divine cosmos, accessed through inner work. Fast forward to medieval Spain and France, and the tradition evolves into what we now call Kabbalah. Here, the Merkaba becomes a symbol in the tree of life, part of the divine structure of the universe. Kabbalists spoke of the four worlds of creation, the 10 sephirot, emanations, and the balance of energies, all of which mirrored the balance necessary to activate the Merkaba within the human body. But what does it actually look like? This is where geometry enters the story. The Merkaba is often depicted as a three-dimensional Star of David, two interlocking tetrahedrons spinning in opposite directions. This shape, known as a stellate octahedron, is not just beautiful. It is believed to have energetic properties. In modern metaphysical interpretations, particularly those popularized by thinkers like Drunvalo Melchizedek in the 20th century, the spinning Merkaba field is said to surround the human body in a toroidal field of light, extending 55 feet in diameter. When activated, this energetic body supposedly aligns the mind, body, and spirit, enabling higher states of consciousness, healing, and even interdimensional travel. The idea is that by meditating on the Merkaba, breathing in specific patterns, and visualizing the geometry, one can unlock dormant spiritual potential. Skeptical? You're not alone. Mainstream science does not endorse these ideas. But let's not forget, ancient peoples often understood reality in poetic, symbolic terms. Their science was encoded in story. Their mathematics were woven into myth. And their spiritual practices were, in many ways, attempts to understand consciousness itself, something even today's neuroscience struggles to explain. In fact, many researchers have begun to notice the connections between sacred geometry and natural forms. The Merkaba structure resembles the molecular geometry of certain crystals. It aligns with the patterns seen in flowers, galaxies, and atomic structures. Some have even speculated that consciousness itself might have a geometric architecture, that our thoughts, emotions, and awareness might not just reside in the brain but radiate through fields of geometric coherence. This is where science, spirituality, and history begin to blur, and the Merkaba sits right at the center. As we continue this journey, we'll explore the global connections, how cultures around the world shared similar visions of divine vehicles and star tetrahedral forms. We'll uncover the meditative practices taught by modern Merkaba schools. We'll examine the criticisms, the contradictions, and the continuing relevance of this ancient symbol in today's search for meaning, healing, and transcendence. Because whether you see it as a metaphor, a mystical truth, or a map to higher states of being, the Merkaba is more than just a star-shaped symbol. It's a story, a bridge, a legacy, and we've only just begun. It becomes clear that this concept was never meant to be confined to one culture or era. Though the name is Hebrew and the earliest textual records lie in ancient Jewish mysticism, the themes, divine chariots, spinning wheels of light, celestial ascent, appear across civilizations. Let's broaden our view and explore how the Merkaba fits into the larger tapestry of ancient metaphysical thought. Take, for example, the Vedic texts from ancient India. In these rich spiritual traditions, particularly within the Upanishads and later yogic philosophy, there are descriptions of light vehicles or soul bodies that can travel through different layers of existence. Yogis trained in advanced forms of meditation were said to transcend physical reality, navigating the astral and causal planes using their subtle bodies, not unlike the Merkaba mystics who ascended the heavenly palaces. Even more striking is the concept of the Vimana, flying palaces described in Indian epics like the Mahabharata and Ramayana. While many interpret these Vimanas as metaphorical, others argue they echo the same themes as the Merkaba: celestial vehicles, radiant light, multidimensional travel, and the connection between spiritual purity and the ability to ascend. The parallels are uncanny. Similarly, in Tibetan Buddhism, advanced monks speak of the rainbow body. The idea that through intense spiritual practice, one's physical body can transform into pure light at the time of death, ascending into higher realms. This phenomenon bears deep resemblance to the Merkaba's spiritual function as a vehicle of ascension. In fact, some images of ascended masters surrounded by glowing geometric halos or orbs are eerily similar to artistic representations of the Merkaba field. And then there's Christianity, where mystics like Hildegard of Bingen and later esoteric sects such as the Gnostics spoke of the soul's journey through layered heavens, accompanied by angelic guides and divine vehicles. The Book of Revelation, much like Ezekiel's vision, is filled with apocalyptic imagery: wheels, beasts, thrones, and light, symbols that may well be referencing ancient chariot mysticism repurposed through a Christian lens. What emerges here is a pattern. Across continents, centuries, and belief systems, we find recurring symbols of spinning light, chariots of fire, wheels within wheels, ascension through purity, and sacred geometries. Whether they called it a vimana, a rainbow body, or a chariot of fire, the essence is strikingly similar. So, how did this all resurface in modern times? For that, we need to shift our attention to the 20th century, a time when spiritual seekers, disillusioned by industrial materialism, turned back to ancient teachings in search of deeper meaning. One of the central figures in the modern Merkaba movement is Drunvalo Melchizedek. His 1990s book The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life introduced millions to the idea that the Merkaba isn't just an ancient symbol. It's a real energetic field that surrounds every human being, dormant until consciously activated. According to Melchizedek, the Merkaba is a spinning field of light and geometry, composed of two interlocking tetrahedrons rotating in opposite directions around the body. When activated through meditation, breathing techniques, and visualization, this field aligns the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual layers of a person, creating harmony and enabling higher consciousness. Some even claim that this activation allows for astral projection, remote viewing, and communication with higher dimensional beings. These ideas are not without controversy. Critics argue that Melchizedek's claims lack scientific verification, and skeptics often lump such teachings in with New Age pseudoscience. But followers of these practices report profound changes, from deep inner peace and emotional healing to intense mystical experiences. Whether real or psychological, the effect is undeniable for those who practice consistently. So what is it, really? A lost science? A metaphysical metaphor? A misinterpretation of ancient texts? Or a timeless spiritual technology that has simply been misunderstood? To answer that, we must look more closely at the geometry of the Merkaba, because it's not just a pretty shape. It is deeply embedded in what's known as sacred geometry, a field of study that explores how geometric forms underpin everything in the universe, from the spirals of galaxies to the structure of DNA. The star tetrahedron, which visually represents the Merkaba, is a fusion of masculine and feminine energies, the upward-pointing triangle symbolizing active force, masculine, and the downward-pointing triangle representing receptive energy, feminine. Their union represents balance, wholeness, and the fusion of dualities. Interestingly, this same geometric relationship is found in ancient mandalas, the flower of life pattern, and even in the structure of carbon molecules, the building blocks of organic life. It's as if the Merkaba isn't just a mystical concept, but a symbolic expression of universal harmony, of how opposites dance to create form, life, and consciousness. Let's take this further. Consider the torus, a donut-shaped energy field recognized in both physics and metaphysics. It's seen in everything from the electromagnetic field of Earth to the structure of the human aura. When animated, the Merkaba spinning in opposite directions forms a toroidal field around the body, drawing in energy, cycling it through the core, and projecting it back out. This is more than symbolic. It resonates with the idea that human beings are not closed systems, but living conduits of energy, constantly interacting with the universe. The Merkaba, in this sense, is a map for understanding that interaction and perhaps even optimizing it. In practical terms, what does this mean? Merkaba meditation is one of the most prominent tools developed from this understanding. It usually involves visualizing the two tetrahedrons, one pointing up, one pointing down, and rotating them around the body in opposite directions. This is combined with rhythmic breathing, chanting, and mental alignment with higher emotional states like love, gratitude, and compassion. The idea is to awaken this energetic vehicle, allowing the practitioner to experience a higher vibrational state, sometimes described as a feeling of floating, pulsing energy, or vast inner light. Some advanced practitioners claim they can travel through dimensions, access hidden knowledge, or even receive guidance from higher beings. Again, it's important to acknowledge, these are experiential claims, not yet verifiable by science. But experience, especially when shared across cultures and times, carries its own kind of weight. So, what are we left with? The Merkaba is many things. To some, it is a literal energy field. To others, it is a symbol of divine unity. To historians, it's a fascinating example of how ancient people tried to encode spiritual truths through myth, metaphor, and math. To seekers, it is a tool, a way to reconnect with something greater than themselves. And perhaps that is the most enduring power of the Merkaba. It invites us to remember that we are more than flesh and bone. That we are, potentially, beings of light, encoded with geometry, aligned with the cosmos, and capable of transcendence. Whether you believe it to be symbolic or real, historical or spiritual, the Merkaba reminds us of a truth echoed across time, that the path to the heavens does not lie in rockets or machines, but in inner transformation, in stillness, in balance, in light, and in that sacred space between body and soul, where the wheels begin to spin, the chariot begins to rise. Now that we've explored the historical roots and spiritual significance of the Merkaba, let's dive deeper into its symbolism, modern applications, and the controversies surrounding it. The Merkaba is not just a relic of ancient mysticism. Today, it's become a symbol of personal transformation, inner healing, and even a blueprint for understanding the structure of reality. But as with any symbol that gains traction in spiritual and metaphysical communities, it comes with both reverence and resistance. Let's begin with its symbolism. At its core, the Merkaba represents the union of opposites, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, physical and spiritual. The upward-pointing tetrahedron is often interpreted as a symbol of fire, dynamic energy, and the divine masculine principle. The downward-pointing tetrahedron symbolizes water, receptivity, and the divine feminine. Together, they form a star tetrahedron, a six-pointed 3D star, which has been interpreted as the harmonization of dual forces. This mirrors concepts found throughout human philosophy. In Taoism, it's the yin and yang. In alchemy, it's the sacred marriage of sun and moon, sulfur and mercury. In psychology, it's the integration of the conscious and unconscious minds. What the Merkaba gives us is not just a shape, but a framework, one that can guide meditation, reflection, and spiritual growth. But the real magic, practitioners say, begins when this framework becomes active. Activating the Merkaba is not a casual affair. It requires discipline, presence, and often a shift in lifestyle. According to modern Merkaba teachers, like Drunvalo Melchizedek and others, daily meditation is essential. These meditations involve breathing in rhythm, visualizing the two tetrahedrons spinning in opposite directions, and bringing your awareness to the heart center, the bridge between physical sensation and spiritual awareness. A typical Merkaba meditation might follow these steps, centering yourself through deep, conscious breathing, visualizing a star tetrahedron around your body, one pointing up, one down, spinning the tetrahedrons, clockwise for the masculine, counterclockwise for the feminine. Activating the field by engaging the heart with feelings of love, gratitude, and forgiveness. Expanding the light field, eventually visualizing it extending several feet from the body. Some traditions even describe a 17-breath process, each breath accompanied by specific visualizations and mantras. With practice, this meditative state is said to create a field of energy that is both protective and transformative. People who regularly practice Merkaba meditation report a wide range of experiences. Heightened intuition, emotional clarity, lucid dreams, out-of-body sensations, and in some cases, what they describe as contact with higher realms of consciousness. Whether these experiences are symbolic, neurological, or metaphysical is still up for debate. But the subjective power they hold for practitioners is undeniable. In healing circles, the Merkaba is also used as an energy healing tool. Some energy workers claim that by visualizing a client within a spinning Merkaba field, they can facilitate deep energetic cleansing, removing blockages, balancing chakras, and even accelerating physical healing. Again, while these claims are not supported by mainstream medicine, they reflect a growing movement of people seeking holistic approaches to health, combining mind, body, and spirit. What's particularly fascinating is how the science of the 21st century is starting to mirror some of these ancient insights, albeit in a different language. In quantum physics, we now know that the universe is not just made of matter but energy fields. Particles behave differently when observed. Consciousness, though not fully understood, seems to play a role in how reality manifests. Researchers exploring the geometry of consciousness have proposed that thoughts may have structure, that emotions and mental states might emit frequencies, shapes, even fields. Some fringe scientists and consciousness researchers suggest that sacred geometry, like the star tetrahedron, may represent the architecture of thought, energy, or even the soul. In neuroscience, too, we're beginning to understand how meditation changes the brain, enhancing neuroplasticity, calming the amygdala, and boosting creative insight. Could it be that practices like Merkaba meditation are tapping into these changes, aligning brain function with spiritual aspiration? While we don't yet have the tools to measure the spinning tetrahedrons of the Merkaba, we are learning how much the mind can influence the body, and perhaps even more. But with all this fascination comes controversy. Many scholars caution against treating symbols like the Merkaba as universal truths without context. Some argue that the modern Merkaba teachings, especially those rooted in New Age spirituality, often blend ancient traditions with unverified, personal revelations, leading to distortions. For example, the term Merkaba, being broken down into Mer, light, Ka, spirit, and Ba, body, is widely popular but not linguistically accurate in traditional Egyptian scholarship. It's a metaphysical interpretation, not a historical fact. Others warn of the dangers of spiritual bypassing, where people focus so much on ascension, light, and higher dimensions that they ignore the work that needs to be done in their present, emotional, and physical lives. In this view, the Merkaba should not be an escape from reality, but a guide for integration, helping us bring divine awareness into everyday action. Another concern is cultural appropriation. Some Jewish scholars have criticized modern Merkaba teachings for co-opting sacred mystical traditions without understanding their context. The original Merkaba mystics spent years preparing for spiritual ascent, often within strict religious frameworks. Taking those symbols out of their original context and using them casually may strip them of their depth, or worse, disrespect the cultures they came from. Still, it's worth asking, why has the Merkaba endured for so long? Perhaps because it points to something universal, an intuitive truth about the human experience. That we are more than flesh. That within us lies an untapped potential. That spiritual evolution is not just possible, but natural. In today's world, where ancient knowledge meets cutting-edge science, the Merkaba stands at the crossroads. It is a map, a metaphor, and a mystery. One that invites each of us to look within, spin the sacred wheels, and rise. And maybe, just maybe, the Merkaba isn't something to be found outside of us, in books, in traditions, or in meditative practices. Maybe it's something that was never separate from us to begin with. A divine geometry humming silently at the center of our being, waiting to be remembered. The question we're left with is both profound and personal. What do we do with this knowledge? After tracing its origins from the ancient throne chariot visions of Ezekiel, through Jewish mysticism, Gnostic and Eastern parallels, to modern meditation practices and sacred geometry, the Merkaba emerges not just as a spiritual curiosity, but as a living invitation to awaken something within. Let's now explore what the Merkaba symbolizes for us today, in a world saturated with technology, overwhelmed by information, and starving for meaning. One of the most powerful modern interpretations of the Merkaba is as a template for human evolution, not just physical or technological, but conscious evolution. In an age where artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and space travel capture our attention, the idea that spiritual evolution is just as vital is beginning to resonate with more people. The Merkaba, as a spiritual vehicle of ascension, symbolizes our latent ability to rise above fear, ego, and limitation, and live from a state of alignment, love, and expanded awareness. But what does ascension look like in practice? It's not necessarily about leaving the body or floating in higher realms. For many, ascension means something much simpler, but no less transformative. It's the moment you pause before reacting with anger. It's choosing compassion over control. It's turning inward when the world screams for your attention. It's living from your heart, even when your mind races. It's choosing to see others, not as enemies, rivals, or strangers, but as mirrors of yourself. In this sense, the Merkaba becomes a symbol of mindfulness, of conscious living. A reminder that we are fields of energy, thought, emotion, and spirit, constantly interacting with one another in complex, unseen ways. When we visualize the spinning light fields of the Merkaba, we're not just playing with ancient geometry, we're tuning into the delicate forces that shape our reality. And that brings us to one of the most important themes associated with the Merkaba: integration. Much of spiritual practice today focuses on transcendence, going higher, escaping the density of the world. But the Merkaba, in its truest sense, is not just about leaving, it's about bringing heaven to earth. In Jewish mysticism, the throne of God descending upon the prophet was as important as the ascent into heaven. In other words, true spiritual awakening is not a departure, it's a return. It's not about escaping this life, it's about infusing it with meaning, intention, and divine awareness. It's about walking in the world with an activated heart, clear mind, and steady presence. This is what Merkaba consciousness offers, a practical spirituality that meets the world head-on. This idea is echoed in teachings around the globe. In Kabbalah, it's known as tikkun olam, the repair of the world through spiritual practice and righteous action. In Buddhism, it's the bodhisattva path, choosing to stay grounded in the world to help others awaken. In indigenous traditions, it's the sacred circle, the knowing that what we do affects not just ourselves, but the entire web of life. When viewed through this lens, the Merkaba is not just a tool for personal growth, it becomes a beacon of service, a geometry of unity, a reminder that we're not isolated beings, but part of an interconnected dance, physical and spiritual, personal and cosmic. And in this dance, intention matters. This is why modern Merkaba practices often emphasize more than just visualization or breathing. They stress the purity of intention. Activating your Merkaba is not about gaining power or abilities. It's about aligning yourself with truth, with love, with the higher good. Without that inner alignment, the practice becomes empty, or worse, distorted. This raises an important point: the responsibility of spiritual knowledge. Throughout history, symbols like the Merkaba have been considered sacred and even secret, reserved for those who had undergone deep spiritual training. Why? Because when spiritual power is pursued without wisdom, it can lead to ego, delusion, or harm. Today, as this knowledge becomes more accessible, that responsibility falls on each of us. The Merkaba is not a toy. It is not a shortcut to enlightenment or a magical trick. It is a living, breathing expression of your innermost being, and engaging with it requires humility, patience, and reverence. But for those who take the path seriously, something beautiful begins to unfold. Life becomes more meaningful. Emotions gain clarity. Relationships deepen. And in quiet moments, there is a felt sense that you are part of something much, much greater, something vast, intelligent, and loving. You begin to realize that the Merkaba isn't just an energy field, it's a reminder. A message from ancient times that still echoes today. You are not separate. You are not alone. You are divine. And that's where the story of the Merkaba leaves us, not with a conclusion, but with an open door. Because this story is not just history. It's a living myth, one that each of us is invited to explore, embody, and carry forward. Whether you see the Merkaba as a spiritual technology, a metaphor for personal growth, or a mystical symbol of universal truth, its power lies not in what it is, but in what it awakens in you. So maybe the final question isn't, what is the Merkaba? Maybe the real question is, what will you become once you remember it? And with that, the wheels begin to spin again. The light shines a little brighter. And the journey, the real journey, begins.